up, everybody? Welcome back to the Jaime Dee Show. Woo! Live on KSHP AM 1400 and 107.1 FM every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 12 p.m. PST out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and live on WRMN AM 1410 and 96.7 FM every Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. CST out of the Elgin in the Chicagoland area. If you're just now tuning in, I went over some daily news, and now we're at the best part of the show. We have an amazing, exciting, knowledgeable, and when I tell you, such a barrier-breaking woman out of Canada. And not only is she out of Canada, but she's a Canadian Trini. Oh, shout out to my Trinis, y'all. Y'all know I love y'all. I'm super excited to bring her on because we're going to break down the history of Canadian R&B. We're going to talk about the marketing strategies of big name artists like Drake, Justin Bieber, and Jessie Reyez, why she is so passionate about the world of music and how it affects our society, why diversity in music matters, and more, because she actually defended her dissertation, got her PhD, and she is a media expert. Listen, she got a PhD in media studies. Y'all, what better way to have not an amazing, but an outstanding individual come on my show and tell it all. Let's welcome in Dr. Amara Pope. Woo! What's up, friend? How are you?
Hello. What an introduction. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure having you on. You look great.
Oh, thank you. I had to dress up a little bit for you, you know?
Yes, thank you. You are live on the radio in Las Vegas and Chicago. We're bringing you from Canada to America, friend. Yes.
So wait, before we start, you got to tell me what these Canadian stereotypes you were worried about projecting on me were.
No. I wasn't going to project any stereotypes. I wanted to that she's Canadian, eh?
Oh, that's okay. I'm guilty of saying A. My Trinity parents make fun of me all the time.
Yes, I literally have friends who live in America who are from Canada, and they hate it when I do that to them. Hate it.
I'm gonna fully admit I do it all the time, so that's
Love
okay.
Love it. Okay, so we have you live on air, and before we get into the depth of this interview, I actually want to give you some time to shine a light on yourself so people can get to know who exactly Dr. Amara Pope is, because you deserve your flowers. I mean, I kind of gave you an introduction a little bit about you having a PhD, but let's talk about your road to becoming a media and marketing expert.
Great. Well, I got my bachelor's degree in English and Fine Arts with a digital media specialization. So I was always interested in different forms of communication. That led to a master's degree where I studied Drake's marketing and branding strategies in different music videos. So I look at how he represents different identities in different videos. And that actually was picked up in the media. And after I presented it at a couple conferences across Canada, the Toronto Star, Vice, a bunch of top name media outlets covered my dissertation and my topic, and that led me to do a TEDx talk. And this was all before my PhD. So all of this kind of created that huge interest I had in looking at the marketing and branding strategies of Canadian artists. So when I went to do my PhD, I wanted to continue to look at what Drake, Justin Bieber, and Jessie Reyez was doing in the contemporary space. But when I went to look at their research or look at their presentation of themselves and of Canadianness, I did the research on them and I wanted to see what they did differently from artists before them. But what I found was the history of Canadian R&B was actually missing in a lot of canonical texts in academia. A lot of these Canadian R&B artists in the 60s and 70s, their interviews were kind of dispersed in different articles, but there was no big book that said, this is what Canadian R&B is. So I almost had to do that historical work to then look at what artists like Bieber, Drake, and Reyes were doing differently today. So it's that history and then the development of Canadian R&B.
Oh, I love that. Now, I just want to let you know that we are, like I said, live on the radio in Las Vegas and Chicago, but we're also live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and Instagram. So I will be looking back and forth at all of the different streaming platforms so that I can get your questions in, because there are people who are actually commenting right now. And I want to ask you this, because you spoke about how you found an interest in music history, specifically Canadian R&B music history. Mm-hmm. What was it that truly said to you, let this be my focus. Let me take a pathway down Canadian R&B and really digesting, dissecting Canadian music?
Well, like I said, I was originally interested in marketing and branding of the contemporary space, but when I went to look for that history, I saw so many Caribbean Canadian artists that were trying to claw their way into mainstream media. But in Canada, it was so overlooked if artists were participating in quote unquote Black music. So that includes soca, reggae, calypso, hip hop, R&B. So many artists in the periphery of society collaborated and came together, got recognition in the US, and then came back to Canada and still were fighting their way through to get mainstream media access. So when I saw the struggles that many of these artists were facing, I reflected on the immigrant struggle that my parents faced in Canada. They're Caribbean immigrants in Canada. They face racism. I face racism. So just hearing some of the stories that these artists told resonate with me and the experiences of my family, that became something I was super passionate about. So although I was interested in marketing, the history is where my heart really lay.
That makes sense. I love that. Now, let's talk about this, because you did say that and I also said it as well, you're Canadian Trini, your parents are immigrants, and you have faced racism yourself. One thing that I know through my own background in education and things I've studied in my master's and my bachelor's as well, is that there's a difference between ethnicity and nationality. And your nationality is that you're a Canadian and that you're Trini. But what do you identify as when you're checking a box when it says Black, white, Hispanic? I know that a lot of times, because I'm going to tell you why I asked you this question, because I did a lot of research on you. And one thing I love about you is how vocal you are about how, and I love this so much, about how growing up, you said that people oftentimes kind of semi-interrogated you to kind of say like, hey, what are you? I've got that a lot, even living in many different major cities. Like even when I went to Miami, people thought I was Dominican. I'm like, no, I'm just Black. But I want to kind of like make it clear for everybody, like when you talk about your actual ethnicity, what do you truly identify as?
I consider myself a Trinidadian Canadian. So when I talk about that identity, when I talk about R&B specifically, I talk about how that national and that racial identity seems to be separate, because as you mentioned, those are different kind of aspects of your larger intersectional identity. And a lot of Canadian R&B artists faced racism and exophony, but because they were Canadian and they were non-Black, many of them. So they were challenged for participating in R&B that's considered traditionally American Black space. So as Canadians and as diverse racial identities, they kind of had a double whammy. They were challenged for their authenticity in creating R&B music.
I love that. And when you say Black music, there is really a intersection between what is considered cultural Black and what is actual ethnicity Black. And when we look at this research behind music and how it has truly changed our society, we see that sometimes, like you said, they don't allow true Blackness in. A lot of times they allow people who are soft Black or who are able to present well with our community and with people who are going to digest music. What's your thoughts when you look at people who are fair-skinned Black versus dark-skinned Black who are trying to break into the industry?
One thing I did in my dissertation is look at what Justin Bieber, Drake, and Jessie Reyez were each facing in terms of their challenge for their participation in the space of Canadian R&B music. And Drake has outlined, for example, Hotline Bling. He says that was supposed to be traditionally a pop genre category, but it was pushed into a Black music genre category because of his skin color. Justin Bieber is a white Canadian, so he talks about being inspired by Canadian or by Black culture, but because he's Canadian, because he's white, he's challenged for his participation in the space. And Jessie Reyez talks about even being a woman in the space and how that's pushed her out a lot of the time. So I think all these different aspects of identity are really important when you're looking at the categorization of music, but also just the relativity of race, in the sense that you could categorize race in so many different ways. Like, for example, people were questioning my identity for being Trini because I wasn't dark enough, whereas in Canada, I'm too dark to be Canadian. So, it's just very relative where you go.
Which is so insane, because if you look at demographics all over, no matter if you're in North America, South America, Central America, Europe, they're all diverse countries and continents. You have all these different spaces that have white, Black, Hispanic, neither, other. And when they try to take it to a space where it's like, you're not white enough to be here, it's really disgusting, because a lot of these spaces are built on the backs of other demographics.
100%. And that's what I argue about Canadian R&B. Like, we're predominantly immigrants now, and it was the work of those immigrants that created the music that we celebrate today. Yet they were pushed out of Canadian media. So it's crazy.
Hey, Dr. Amara Pope, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have more interview questions for you. Stick around. This is the Jaime Dee Show live on KSHP out of Las Vegas and also WRMN out of the Elgin and Chicagoland area. Hey, like I told you, if you have any questions, comment live. I'm looking at all the streaming platforms. My hands are going everywhere. My eyes are going everywhere. I'm still keeping my questions in my head, all right? I got y'all. Or call in at 847-931-1410. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Jaime Dee Show. Woo! Live on KSHP AM 1400 and 107.1 FM every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 12 p.m. PST out of the Las Vegas area. And we're also live on WRMN AM 1410 and 96.7 FM every Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. CST out of the Elgin and the Chicagoland area. Oh, yeah, we're also live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook at The Jaime Dee Show. That's spelled TheJaimeDeeshow. If you are having a good time, I see we have more people viewing the YouTube than actually in the chat. You're more than welcome to log in using your Gmail, and you can comment your questions there. I see we have some questions in the chat right now that I will ask. So make sure you put your questions in the chat so I can acknowledge them later in the interview. And if you want to call in, 847-931-1410. Again, that's 847-931-1410 to get live on the radio. All right, let's bring in the amazing Dr. Amara Pope back on to the show. Because listen, we got some things to talk about, friend. And I'm really excited to have you here because you're really dissecting this history that a lot of people in American culture don't even think about, because unfortunately we still are two different countries. And even though we have a lot of similarities in our people and the things that we do and the entertainment that we share, there still is a barrier. And so let's break that barrier today. And let's talk about the history of Canadian R&B.
Well, when I talk about the history of Canadian R&B, I go all the way back to minstrelsy. So that's when we had white performers come on stage in the 19th century and represent what Black identities were. And back then, we talk about minstrelsy transforming or transpiring into what we call Black genre music. So it created these ideas of what Black identities were, and that then went into the organization of music genre categories. So that's what actually eventually led from Billboard taking Black music to Black singles to R&B and changing it multiple times, urban, to all these different genres, but really R&B having a long history of representing Black music. And when it represented that Black music, it also then, as I mentioned before the break, became associated with Black American culture. So when we had Canadians participating in the space, we saw many Canadians moving to the US to get recognition before coming back to Canada. And so when I talk about Canadian R&B history, I talk about it being deeply indebted to American culture. So as you mentioned, Americans don't really think about it, but when you do think about it, you see how much Americans have actually helped catapult what I call Canadian R&B music.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about catapulting Canadian R&B music, how do you think that those artists like Drake, Justin Bieber, Jessie Reyez, who do go into America, pop off, become an American, when I tell you like star, but then go back to Canada, how do you think they're received? Are they received the exact same way? Is there a little you kind of left us, become something better? Like what actually happens when they come back?
Well, when I talk about Bieber, Drake, and Reyez in the categories of Canadian R&B genres and generations, I talk about Bieber, Drake, and Reyez all representing kind of the new genre of contemporary R&B, which mixes hip hop, pop, R&B music. So they introduced the pop element to get more mainstream hits. But I put Bieber and Drake in their own generation, and I put them as separate from Reyez because Bieber and Drake came out right when social media was hitting. Yep. So they gathered a local audience. They did have fans in the US or in Canada and the US. And when they went to the US, they still had those Canadian fans. Where Jessie Reyez is a third generation, she had more homegrown help, more homegrown talent. So I think that in a way she had less of an ostracism when she came back to Canada because she was creating her career a lot within Canada itself. But we see in a lot of Toronto and, many of our small Ontario towns here, a lot of hate towards Bieber and Drake. And it's just become a thing. It's cool to hate on those artists because it's crazy. It's crazy that we don't want to celebrate our own talent. And they've often stated that they found more support and more fans in the US rather than Canada.
I find it really crazy how the term it be your own people really resonates with everybody. It could be in a different nationality, it could be in a different ethnicity group. It doesn't, that term does not stick with just Black people. And it's crazy how it's so much easier and so much more fun, quote unquote, to hate on your people than it is to take a step back, realize you're putting on for our people, you're making a way for our people, and now you're opening doors for people like me, who's right now being a hater because I wish I was in your spot.
Yeah. They're jealous. They want to be, there's so many Canadian artists that are trying to break in and they see what these few artists have accomplished. And then it just becomes a jealousy thing where they want to hate on them.
Because again, they're opening the doors for those jealous people to actually make a way. Now it's easier for those jealous people who are hating to get into the industry than it ever was before. But instead of taking a step back, respecting that, understanding like, hey, it wasn't going to be me, but it was somebody else. But now I have a higher chance of getting there as well. They just say, let's just hate. And I think that's the dumbest thing that people do, especially in our world that we're living in now, because we already face so much hate as it is walking outside. Why not love on each other? Now, I want to talk about this because when you look at the history of Canadian R&B, you look at how a lot of American culture truly does create culture around the world. When we look at what you said about how Canadian R&B started off with white artists and white artists portraying Black culture and so on and so forth, how would you say Canada created their music genres? Was it something that they created for themselves and it kind of just mixed with American culture, or did American culture really create the space in Canada and Canada just jumped on it?
Yeah, when I talk about that history of Canadian R&B, I talk about kind of the creation of our music world, and I talk about the very first music genre charts and award shows, and a lot of it was created through the categories that the US was already creating and using. And so when we created a star system in Canada, we relied heavily on what the US was doing. We're a very small country in comparison. We have a smaller population, we have a younger music industry. So a lot of what the US was doing is what we mimicked when we were creating ours. And that involves creating a predominantly white entertainment industry. So we did the same thing in Canada, except a bit worse, you could say, because we didn't allow as much diversity to happen in mainstream media.
Which is kind of crazy to me because as a radio personality, an actor on TV, international commercial artist, and international Billboard artist, I have been I've been shown opportunities in Canada that I really wanted. And I'm like, I want to audition for this role, or I want to apply for this radio position because I think Canada's great. But you guys are so serious about, we're going to give these jobs to Canadians only, and you have to be a Canadian resident to get these jobs. But when you look at how the lack of support for Canadian artists actually is, it makes no sense how on one hand they're like, we're feeding everything to Canadians, but on the other hand, we're also hindering them from really being great. Let's talk about that.
Well, when I was conducting my research for my PhD, I interviewed 35 marketing professionals and music industry executives in Canada and in the US. And when I was interviewing them in Canada, I found that a lot of the music industry executives recognized our lack of support for quote unquote Black music, and it's still occurring today. And when I was doing the research, I saw, Republic Records in the US, for example, came out and said that they're going to stop using the term urban because it had very negative connotations. It was harming a lot of the artists pushed into that category rather than helping them. So we see it happening in Canada and in the US, but many of the Canadian music industry executives said that we have a much longer way to go than in the US.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Now, we are getting some submitted questions right now, so I want to ask you before we go to break. Tracy, the Way Up CEO, says, how does one gain Canadian fame in the absence of American influence?
I don't think you can actually silo the two. I think we're so deeply indebted to one another, especially Canadians heavily relying on the entertainment space in the US, that we haven't seen that happen yet. And I don't know if we ever will, because our roots are so deeply indebted in US culture.
Now, this is a great segue to the next question she asked, because you say you're so indebted to the American culture. She wants to know, who are some truly famous Canadians who aren't Americanized?
Well, although I say Jessie Reyez does heavily rely on US culture. I think she is a very proud Canadian because she also talks about the immigrant struggle, similar to my experiences. She talks about growing up in many different parts of Ontario, and she heavily relies on her Canadian identity to be portrayed in her music videos as well as in interviews. She represents Toronto anywhere she goes. So I would definitely say Jessie Reyez is through and through a Canadian.
Love that. Now, I watch your interviews on other shows, and you have specified where you were born and raised. And I want you to go ahead and shout that out, because I know people love to be like, I'm from here, I'm from there. We're talking about Toronto. And when I'm seeing where you're from, it sounds so similar to your name. Where are you from?
Oh, okay. So I was born in Scarborough, Ontario, but I moved to somewhere called Elmira, Ontario. So I became Amara from Elmira. And Scarborough, multicultural, very diverse, very much in the hub of Toronto, diversity, central entertainment industry, booming. That space is booming. But then when I moved to Elmira, Ontario, we were surrounded by horse and buggies, predominantly Mennonites. We were the only brown family in a corner house. So it was a very different experience.
Right.
But yeah.
So Amara from Elmira. Did I do that right?
From Elmira, yeah.
I love it. All right, Dr. Amara Pope, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got more questions for you. Don't go nowhere. You better stay right there. All right, let's bring back in Dr. Amara Pope. Hello. Hey, welcome in. All right, so in the last segment, we were kind of talking about a vast majority of things as pertains to Canadian R&B, how it was birthed, how it has evolved, and how it really has pushed Canadians to move to America and be present in our culture to become who they are today. We spoke about Drake, we spoke about Justin Bieber, and we spoke about Jessie Reyez. And so I want to talk about that. You have your PhD where you talk about the online marketing strategies of big name artists like Drake, Justin Bieber, and Jessie Reyez. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool. So I know through my research, because I wouldn't be a journalist if I didn't do research. Dr. Amara Pope, you have been on the Billboard, not just Billboard, but the Billboard. You've been on CTV, iHeartRadio, which I've worked for, National Post, CBC, Vice, Daily Hive, Your Morning, and more. And you're also a TEDx speaker. Now, hold on, real quick. I'm also a TEDx speaker. I was flown out to New York to do a TED Talk. Do I get to be a TEDx-like person? Do I get to put that on my title?
Yeah, of course.
I didn't know that.
That's your handle.
I'm about to put that on my handle. I didn't know that. Yes, if y'all didn't know, I am a TEDx speaker.
There you go.
But yes. So one thing I'm super excited about is the fact that you have been on so many different platforms, and not only have you spoke about many of the same different topics, you have been able to be vast in your approach and in your communication and always spill a little bit more each and every time. And so I want to give people a preview of you on CTV's This Hour with Angie Seth, where you spoke about Canadians redefining R&B and what that looks like for artists like Drake and so on. So for everybody's looking in, let's take a listen.
To bring music into this, because that's sort of where you dive into with your PhD. Canadian R&B, you look at sort of the genre of Canadian R&B, how it came about, how the influence of it, the popularity of it. But we know that when we look at the lyrics and we look at, the likes of Drake, et cetera, and his early music, there's a story. There's always a story there. And now, as in your research, you look at that stuff and you look at and you look at the lyrics. Talk to me about the relationship between Canadian R&B and diversity.
Yes. So in my PhD dissertation, I looked at the rise of Canadian R&B and how many immigrants actually contributed to that space.
Right.
They paved the way. And because they lacked support in Canadian mainstream media, they had to work in the periphery of society.
Right.
Oftentimes moving to the States, but also collaborating across many different genre styles. That could be soca, reggae, calypso, R&B, even hip hop. And because they collaborated together, they created this mixture of cultural sounds and styles.
Now, let's get into this, because you say they've mixed cultural sound and styles. It's the new genre of contemporary R&B, which has hip hop, pop, calypso, reggae, and so much more. When we look at social media, and I'm going to be very frank with you, there really is no real rule book. People love to get on social media and say, this is how you become famous. This is how you do this. But as we know, the algorithm changes all the time. As we know, us as content creators and consumers, we don't control social media. We're just participants on social media. And when we think we cracked the code, they're like, gotcha. And so I want to talk about the online marketing of Drake, Justin Bieber, and Jessie Reyez, because we know that, yes, they could become big names, but it's so easy nowadays to get canceled, to fall off, to have something in your past show up, and you're not a celebrity anymore. So let's talk about how they've been able to use their online marketing to break through in their industry and also continue to stay relevant in the industry.
Yeah, well, Justin Bieber, Drake, and Jessie Reyez, I talk about how all three of them break into the music industry and essentially look at their rise to fame. And when I do that, I look at not only how they used online marketing platforms, but traditional networking as well. So I always preface that their online marketing strategies are coupled with the traditional marketing strategy of networking. So all three of them had specific individuals that helped them to catapult their careers at the very beginning. And that's what helped them to break barriers. So when you start to think of Justin Bieber as like an overnight success, or Drake as kind of an anomaly that he broke in through nowhere, that he just came out of nowhere and he was this viral online sensation, I kind of debunk that myth and say that they had to use the traditional ways as well as social media. And I look at how Drake back in the day used Blogspot and MySpace to help amplify his visibility. I know. It seems ancient now. Right. And then Justin Bieber, he used YouTube, and Jessie Reyez, she actually used Facebook. And all of these different platforms that they used helped them attract the attention of one key individual that would help them break in.
Now, you said that there was a specific person that they used to help them break in the industry. Who was this specific person? Was it another celebrity?
It was, so for Drake, he met Jazz Prince, and Jazz Prince, his father was in the music industry, and Jazz Prince was trying to break in the industry as well to represent talent. So he was young and eager to look for talent. Drake was young and eager to look for somebody to represent him. So that seemed to be a very good synergy. Jazz Prince then introduced him to people like Lil Wayne, Kanye West, and those connections kind of snowballed from there. Justin Bieber, he met Scooter Braun, and Scooter Braun was already well vetted in the industry. He had many connections already, but he was also looking to do his own thing and to find his own talent. He found Asha Roth, and then he found Justin Bieber on social media. So then that was also a great match. And then Jessie Reyez met Mauricio Ruz, and Mauricio was also in the same position, looking for new talent to then grow in Canada, and he came across Jessie Reyez on Facebook. So again, it's just finding that key individual who's also equally as eager to help you break in, and you being that talent that is as eager to break into the industry.
What you just said is something that we truly sometimes forget. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And we look at this online marketing strategies we're talking about with these three different artists. It started off with who they knew. And we have another comment right now and question that says, even though Drake met these people and they put him on, did you not factor in the fact that his dad was already famous and that Drake was known for acting? I mean, he was on Degrassi. Everyone loves Degrassi.
So I 100% include that in my long dissertation. It's over 400 pages. So I'm trying to give you the brief synopsis. But yes, I talk about Drake's, he talks about even being photographed on stage with his father on his lap. So he was introduced to the music industry well before, he got signed. And I talk about how he uses MySpace and Blogspot to take his online audience from Degrassi and from these different social media platforms and put them onto his music. So he already had a local fan base. He was performing in local spaces in Toronto, and he took that local audience to help catapult his career as well.
Dr. Amara Pope, I have to ask this, and this may make you chuckle a little bit, but you're already laughing. I just have to ask this because you've been on so many major platforms. You have your PhD. Congratulations. You defended your dissertation, and you talk often about Drake, Justin Bieber, and Jessie Reyez. Has any of them reached out to you? I mean, you talk about them so much. I mean, you're literally going on a promotional campaign for them. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, let me preface this. I have been talking about Drake for a long time with like TEDx, with my master's degree, but with Jessie Reyez, Justin Bieber, I only graduated technically in November. So this is all new. I'm hoping one of them reaches out to me at some point. I would love to do it. I mean, I study them as an academic, but also as a fan. Of course, I love their music. Of course, I love what their branding and marketing strategies are. So for me, it was fun to do this research. And I wouldn't say I idolize them, but I definitely respect what they do.
Let me tell you this, Dr. Amara Pope. The Jaime Dee Show has a lot of exposure. I've been in the industry for a long time. I've brushed shoulders with a lot of these different celebrities. So you never know where this interview can go. I speak it into existence for you because like you said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I just asked this. When you meet them, don't forget about me.
Oh, okay. I'll just say this now. If I meet any three of them, I will thank you first thing I do when I see them.
Y'all heard that live on the radio and live on all different streaming platforms. I will make sure to call you out if you don't.
Oh, you will. I mean, you have it recorded now. I'm on the air.
I love it. I love it. And when you come down to America, we gotta hang out, friend. We gotta do things. Now, when we talk about how passionate you were, because you started in marketing and digital and all that other stuff before you really got into your dissertation, your PhD in truly Canadian R&B, you said that, through your research, that's what gave you that bright light of like, there's another thing that I want to research and get into. Is there anything else that you can say, this is why I'm so passionate about the world of music?
I grew up in a Trini household. Music was such a huge part of my existence. It became a part of every holiday, just every day-to-day activity, cooking, everything, So music to me is just a part of my everyday life. I also go to the gym every day, going to the gym, listening to my beats, just music is so integral to me as a person. So I would say that is where the passion lies, is just a true fan and a true contributor to the space that I just want to see more diversity represented. So it's not just a research project to me. It's not something that I like to talk about. It's something that I truly believe in.
Now, you talk about how diversity truly matters and how it does push cultures forward and representation matters. Why is it that music affects our societies as much as it does today?
I think musical artists are in a unique position of influence, different from political leaders, different from, quote unquote, social media influencers. These artists can resonate with us through storytelling, and that can be experienced on so many different platforms. Whether you hear it on the radio, you watch a music video, you go to the grocery store and you hear their music, they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous in our society. So I think that they have a huge potential influence to shape our culture. And I think that when they use it in good ways, in ways of bringing us together, creating live concerts to bring that audience, doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, what nationality you are, you're in that audience and you feel a sense of community. And I think that artists can do that in such a beautiful way.
You're not wrong. We do have a personal question from Kendra. She wants to know, have you been to OVO XO Festival or Carnival in Canada yet?
I have been to Carnival in Canada a couple times, and actually it's my 30th birthday this year and my mom's 60th.
Me too!
Oh, okay. So I'm planning to go with my mom and my best friends to rock Carnival this year. It will be great. I've never actually played Mass before, so that's something I really want to do. I can't wait to see my mother and me just rocking that. It'll be super fun, but I have not been able to go to OVO. Honestly, between us, it's very expensive. So I have not been able to afford it right now to be able to go. One of these years we'll get there, but yeah.
Well, congratulations on everything that you're doing. Happy early birthday, and you will be able to go to OVO XO Festival one day. I'll be in Canada. I've always visited. I've been there several times. You never know, I might be able to be in your town one day soon. Now, I want to know this before we leave off today. What's next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? I am taking this to the road and doing a ton of public speaking. I love to guest lecture. I love to do presentations for companies, learning more about diversity. So I want to take this passion I have for representing diversity and take it anywhere I can go at, in schools, in corporations, wherever's willing to listen. So I'm happy to do that this year.
You will continue to break down barriers. I believe in you. I'm rooting for you. And thank you so much. I mean, look, you reached out to me on Instagram and we're live right now.
I know.
So happy that you did that. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Jaime Dee Show. I'm glad that we're connecting now. We are here. We're there, friend. We're turning 30 this year. I'm calling mine the Flirty 30. What you calling yours?
Oh, I love that. No. We'll keep going with the 30 flirty. I love it.
Yes, love it. Thank you so much. Let everybody know how they can follow you and support you as you continue to grow in your career.
You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. All of my handles are at DrAmaraPope. So at Dr. Amara Pope, or visit my website, www.DrAmaraPope.ca or .com.
Yes, thank you so much. Like I said, I'm rooting for you. Have a good rest of your day, okay?
Thank you. Take care.
See you, friend. Everybody, that was Dr. Amara Pope. I know y'all are clapping it up back at home, but I'm going to ring that bell for her. So grateful to have her live on my radio show. She's such an awesome light. I really am rooting for her. She's going to be blessed. She's going to have everything she needs and more. And I promise you, she's going to meet Drake, Justin Bieber, or Jessie Reyez, and she better make sure she let me know. All right, everybody, this has been the Jaime Dee Show live on KSHP AM 1400 and 107.1 FM every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 12 p.m. PST out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and live on WRMN AM 1410 and 96.7 FM every Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. CST out of the Elgin and the Chicagoland area.